redzonesports.bet, the British home of American sports.
Hello and welcome to SportsHeads. We're here in conjunction with redzonesports.com, and you see this fabulous studio that they have provided for us. But I'm here with the guru himself, my man, Mike Carlson, back in the hookup together. Haven't been together in a long time, and it's good to see him. But Mike, why don't we just get with it? Miami, New Orleans Saints. Let's talk about Miami for a quick second. When the Miami Dolphins picked up Jay Cutler, were you surprised?
Not really. Once Tannehill got injured, Cutler seemed to be as good a pickup as they could. I mean, you know, I keep saying, why don't they sign Colin Kaepernick, like a lot of us do? Mm-hmm. But Cutler had played under Adam Gase at Chicago, so that made sense to go with a familiar quarterback who knew your system when you had to break him in quickly. Now, Gase's system isn't as complicated as people think. Most of the places he's been successful, in Denver, in Chicago, he was basically with a run-first team. And the quarterback is throwing a lot of short passes, quick releases, which you'd think he'd be able to nurture Cutler along too. But what we've seen from Cutler is kind of the same old Jay Cutler. You know, even in Chicago, when he goes down, when he goes long, he makes mistakes, he's inaccurate, he's not great under pressure.
Let's stay with the quarterback position. Now, the Miami Dolphins on the defensive side are allowing the opposition to complete 78% of their passes. They're going up against Drew Brees, and Drew Brees on a bad day, he completes 78% of his passes.
Eyes closed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the only good news for them is, well, there's 2 points. One is, of course, there's injury issues with both tackles for New Orleans. Armstead definitely is out. Strife might play, might not. And of course, Willie Snead is out, and Brandon Cooks is in New England. So they don't have the quality of receivers that they had last year. But having said that, you're absolutely right. Brees is playing, you know, like he was 25, not 35 years old. He's incredibly accurate. He's got a system that lets him be accurate. So they've got to put pressure on Drew Brees.
Talking about putting pressure on Drew Brees, Lawrence Timmons is possibly back for this week. They say he's going to be back in the lineup after missing the first 2 games. What does he add to that defense?
Well, Lawrence Timmons at his best is an inside linebacker who can take on people, thereby helping them stop the run, and could play outside, can get into coverage a bit, especially against a tight end. Now, remember, he went missing, basically, which is why he was suspended. Bringing him over to London might not be the best idea that they've ever had. But I suspect that, you know, having not played in the first couple of weeks, he'll be pretty fresh. He'll probably be pretty good. I would expect him to see a lot of playing time.
What do you expect of Jay Ajayi? He's a guy that's dealing with a little bit of injuries. You know, first game he's, 122 yards, and the next game his numbers are, the whole team's numbers were down. In last week's action.
Partly because they couldn't run the ball as much, partly because he was a bit hurt. Now he's nursing a knee. He runs in a similar kind of style, and we talked about it before with Leonard Fournette, but even more so, he runs in that Marshawn Lynch style, where he invites the first contact, knowing he could break it. And if you look back at last year for Jay Ajayi, he got virtually half of his yardage in like 3 games for the season. He had 3 200-yard games. And he's a boom or bust kind of runner, because if he can't break that first tackle, or he usually does, but the time it takes him to break that first tackle brings other tackles to him. He's not a shifty guy, he's a power guy. I think he's always going to be nursing injuries, shoulders, knees, because that's where you generate your power from.
Has it shown to be any of an effect for or against when teams arrive? We see New Orleans Saints arriving on Monday. We see the Miami Dolphins going to come in on Friday. Does it seem to matter which day you come in as far as being successful?
In the past, I used to think that the team coming in on the short week had a bit of an advantage, but that was when they had a 6 o'clock kickoff. And the 6 o'clock kickoff is 1 o'clock Eastern time, which means most of these teams would be playing the game body clock-wise at the exact same time they would be playing if they were back in the States. So if you came in on Friday morning and you didn't try to adjust too much to jet lag, your body would be ready to play at 1. If you're there all week, sometimes I think teams just get a little bit too distracted by the atmosphere, by all the ancillary stuff that they're doing, and they wind up sort of taking it for granted. Now, last week, Baltimore came in short they came in on Friday. They didn't even take a walkthrough at Wembley. They didn't go to Wembley till it was game time, and they looked really flat at the start of the game. And the Jags, who came in on the Friday but are used to it, looked really, really good. So, I mean, I think that the short stay is a benefit, but the Saints have been here before.
Yep.
Under the current management, and I get the feeling that they'll be prepared to go.
So what do you see the advantage for either team in this game that's going to set them apart and win this contest?
I think the advantage is with New Orleans in the sense that they've got the established passing game, and maybe they can get a running game. They tried to last week, and they actually were pretty successful between the three different backs that they were running through, and they've got Kamara who can catch the ball out of the backfield. For Miami, they need to be able to rush the passer. That's the big thing. The Saints do not have a stud rusher like Cameron Wake, but they've got Chandler Jones, who's a really effective player. If they can scheme around him a bit, I think it gives them even more of an advantage. I kind of like the Saints in this one.
We see the New Orleans Saints coming off a victory last week. The Miami Dolphins, they go down to defeat to the New York Jets. Want to keep them moving here. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, both 2-1, both coming off a defeat. These two teams first got it on in 1996. Pittsburgh leads the all-time series 26-21. You see these two teams, Mike, and it's such a series over time that has been defined by the defense.
Oh yeah.
And and then coming into last week, it was defined by the defense. But then Baltimore let the Jags get away with a big number, and the Pittsburgh doesn't shut down the Chicago Bears.
I figure that flight back from London for Baltimore, in their minds, lasted about 130 hours.
Yeah.
That was going to be a long ride. And normally at the start of the year, people say, like, what games are you looking forward to? And I always circle Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, because they're always good games. This year, I don't know. The problem the problem is largely down to injury, strangely enough. Both quarterbacks, we know Joe Flacco's got back problems, and he does not look even like Joe Flacco from before his knee injury.
Yep.
And Ben Roethlisberger doesn't have any declared injuries, but he also doesn't really look like Ben Roethlisberger. Le'Veon Bell isn't injured, but he was late arriving. For the Ravens, Brandon Williams was out last week. I'm not sure how, whether he's going to play. I suspect he will. But Brent Urban got hurt right at the beginning of the game. That was two of their starting three down linemen were out of that game. And that's a problem for them if Williams doesn't come back, because he really, at the nose tackle, he is the key to everything that happens in their defense, in the same way that Javon Hargrave is for Pittsburgh. You got probably the two best nose tackles in the league now in this game. So if you really like watching defense, watch those two guys over the center.
People ask about, when they talk about defenses, are these guys, the formations that they run on the defensive side, is that a big deal for you when you look at what Baltimore, their defensive set, Pittsburgh's, their defensive sets?
They're both 3-4 teams, basically. And, the way the NFL has gone in the past years, most 3-4 teams wind up playing an awful lot of time in what you'd call a hybrid defense, where it looks sometimes like a 4-3 or a 4-2 with a nickel formation. They tend to stay pretty much in that 3-4 alignment. And there's flexibility because Suggs, Suggs as a linebacker is in effect a defensive end if they want to use him that way. And he's at 35, he's still a good player. But I was surprised last week watching Jacksonville kill Baltimore on passes over the middle in front of their linebackers. Because if you're going to play a 3-4 and your inside linebackers are dropping back into the coverage, they can't drop all the way back if they can't come up, and they weren't coming up. They were sitting back, letting the catches be made, and that hurt them a lot. And Pittsburgh could drive them crazy with that because they've got receivers who will come over the middle. Even Antonio Brown, for example, will work the middle of the field. And if you ask sort of what the difference in the game would be, because you've got fairly similar teams, losing Marshall Yanda made Baltimore's offensive line into a question mark, and Jacksonville attacked that right guard position. Two different guys were playing it. They attacked both of them with success. Pittsburgh's fairly solid on the offensive line. Not great, but okay. Pittsburgh's got the home run threat in Antonio Brown. They've got the big runner in Le'Veon Bell. And, if you believe that star players deliver, and Antonio Brown has delivered almost every week, gives Pittsburgh the edge.
I mean, you think this could be the game for Le'Veon Bell? Comes in averaging 3.5 yards a carry, but also the fourth week that he is back. You talk about the Baltimore Ravens having problems along their defensive line, that maybe this could be the coming out party for Bell this season.
If I'm Pittsburgh, that's probably the first thing I want to check out. I want to run him a few times. I want to run him outside, maybe get him the ball in some space and see how Baltimore is coping with that. Because, he started out looking not quite Eddie Lacy-esque, but he wasn't in playing shape when he came in and signed, and he's probably worked his way into that now.
The Pittsburgh Steelers having problems with their safeties. One or both of them could be missing. Baltimore, can they take advantage of that lack of back there?
They can, but they have to be a little bit creative about it. What we saw against Jacksonville is Mike Wallace down the sideline. Mike Wallace down the sideline. If you want to work the safeties, you've got to go over the middle of the field because you're going to have the cornerbacks, otherwise you're going to pick it up. And to be honest, the Jags got away with a little bit of interference, small-scale interference against long passes. But you have to kind of expect that the way the NFL is played now, and you've got to be more creative. I think it's something that Baltimore's offense just didn't seem to have last week. I was amazed at how little different they tried during the course of the game.
Well, we saw that Pittsburgh, they were shocked by the Chicago Bears in overtime. Baltimore got drilled by Jacksonville. So you're looking for a team to respond. Which team do you see responding in this week coming up with the win?
I think the bigger difference in play might be Baltimore because they were so atrocious. They can't get worse. The positive thing for them is that Chicago is a good defensive team, especially up front. If they've got their people back up front, they might be able to do some of the same things to Pittsburgh that the Bears did. Chicago also was a running team, and it was Jordan Howard, Terry Cohen who won that game. It wasn't Mike Glennon at quarterback. So if Terrence West and Buck Allen can do the same thing, but you look at Terrence West, Buck Allen, you don't think Jordan Howard, Terry Cohen. But that's where, if they're going to win the game, that's what they got to do.
Yeah, that Baltimore and Pittsburgh should be a great one. Another set of 2-1 teams that will be getting it on. The Oakland Raiders visiting the Denver Broncos. And these teams have met since October 1960. The Denver Broncos, the Raiders lead the series 62-51-2. But the Oakland Raiders have been the team this, decade, have been the more successful of the two in those head-to-head battles. Both teams coming off of losses, and you look at them and you say, at this stage of the season, in week 4, does Mile High really have that much of an effect?
It will this week, I think, because Oakland was in Washington. So they're flying back to Oakland, and they're flying into Denver, 2 road games in a row. That's tough. And you run out of gas at Mile High. I mean, teams know how to cope. Oakland's been there before, obviously, so they know how to cope with that. But still, teams just seem to have trouble in the fourth quarter playing against the Broncos. Oakland's in for a real test because Denver can play defense, especially at home when the noise is really great. It gives those pass rushers a little bit of an edge, and Von Miller doesn't need much of an edge to make an impact. And so far, they have not been overpowering in terms of offensive line. Defensively, they've got a lot of problems. And Trevor Siemian, is he the guy to take advantage of that? Well, he didn't look like it against Washington, but the first 2 games of the season, he did look pretty good.
And we see that the Oakland Raiders, last week coming off their game, they were 0 for 11 on 3rd down, 1 for 2 on 4th down. But the thing is that the receivers basically just got beat up by Washington's cornerbacks. And so you look at this and you say, can the Denver Broncos do the same?
You saw some drops from them. You saw some drops from Oakland in the week before's game as well. And Denver certainly can do the same. If they were looking at the game film and what Minuski did in Washington, they've got the cornerbacks to do the same kind of thing. Chris Harris, Aqib Talib, Bradley Roby. I mean, they probably got the best group of 3 of anybody in the league. They don't play that much press, but they can play press. And with the pass rush, meaning that Carr's got to get rid of the ball more quickly, that's it's a definite bad combination for Derek Derek Carr, not David, his brother. And what did he throw for, 118 yards, something like that?
Yeah, 100. I think they had 140 yards in total offense, so not a whole lot more than that.
And and he'd had a couple of big games. You expect him to have big games before that. But I think Denver will have looked at that. I think the game plan is pretty simple for what they'll do. Not convinced Oakland's defense is going to be able to shut them down completely. And playing at home in Denver, you have to like the Broncos.
Let's stay with two guys. We talk about on the defensive side. Which one of these floats your boat the most? Khalil Mack, Von Miller.
That's a good one. Miller's got a better supporting cast, but I think Miller is probably a more natural pass rusher. He's got a wider set of skills, but Khalil Mack's also a really good pass rusher. Hasn't made the impact so far this season that you would expect from him. And people thought coming out of Buffalo, he would have a big jump to make to the University of Buffalo, not the Bills, and not the city of Buffalo, which is where Kev comes from. People coming out of Buffalo,
gotta be from somewhere.
Yeah, well, people coming out of Buffalo have an adjustment to make to the real world.
That's right.
And
I'm still adjusting.
And Khalil Mack, had a little bit of adjustment, but did. And last year, you expected that he would take the jump to being a premier pass rusher. Von Miller was slowed down a little bit, it looked like, last year. So you'd think he'd be passing him. The guy who so far has surprised me, just to drop a name in, we'll talk about later, is Justin Houston, who after being injured for so long, it looks really fresh and new. Kind of like me.
Let's jump to that quarterbacks. I look at Derek Carr, Trevor Siemian, you look at their numbers, really not a lot of difference. I mean, Siemian averages more yards a game passing. They both have the same amount of touchdowns, but Carr has, 2 less interceptions. And, so it seems like to me does one cancel one out, or is Carr that much superior? Because people seem to always overlook Siemian no matter who he's in competition with. He won't
get the credit that he probably deserves. But Carr, I think, has the potential to be an elite quarterback, and I'm not sure Siemian does. He's in a good system for him to play, with a couple of decent running backs. Jamal Charles looks another guy who, out of Kansas City who looks brand new, and a decent set of receivers. And Demaryius Thomas, always a big threat. Emmanuel Sanders, so 2 guys he can throw to. So that can help him out a lot. Pass protection will be a problem for them. The rookie left tackle Garrett Bowles is still hurt. I think he played hurt, but he looked like he really couldn't move. And he's still not. I mean, even if he weren't hurt, he's still a rookie at left tackle, and Khalil Mack will feast on that. That's where he's going to be attacking, I would assume.
Both teams coming off losses. Which team do you see continuing going to losing the game, but also going to 2-2 on the scorecard?
I think the Broncos win this one at home. I mean Kansas City, do they run away with the AFC West, which seemed improbable at the start of the season? But San Diego's not looking very good. These 2 teams could both keep up with Kansas City. That division, ideally, they're going to be beating each other, and you might only need 11 wins to win it.
Well, that'll be a tough AFC West encounter. But let's not forget 1 and 2 teams getting it on. Indianapolis traveling to Seattle, and you look at that Indianapolis situation, and again, Andrew Luck will not be practicing this week, so they're still going to go with Jacoby Brissett, who was with New England. And what do you think he learned over his time of being with the Patriots?
That cliche, do your job? I think that's what he learned, because the 2 games he started as a rookie they had a game plan to make it easy for him, to not ask a lot of him. And the second game, which they lost to Buffalo and Rex Ryan, he couldn't do very much because he had a broken bone in his hand. But he was the only option they had at quarterback, so they really had to scale it down for him. So I think he learned that. He's a poised quarterback for a kid with not that much experience. And that was kind of why they drafted him. I think that was what they liked about him. What he brings to them is a better chance of winning than they had
Tolzien.
with Tolzien,
Yep.
because he can avoid the rush. He can keep plays alive, and he will make some mistakes. He made one in his first start, a bad interception in overtime.
So how does he match up with that Seattle secondary?
That's the problem. That's what I was going to say. This is the real test. I mean, this is a whole different. They're going to come at him. They're going to make it difficult for them. Their receivers, T.Y. Hilton may be the most overlooked great player in the NFL, because he does it every week against almost everyone. And this is going to be a challenge for Richard Sherman, for the other guys in that secondary, to shut him down. They don't have great secondary weapons behind Hilton. They really rely on him to come up with 100 yards every week receiving. They're not going to be able to run the ball very well.
But Seattle, very beatable. I just say offense, you look at them and you go like, what is missing? And then the guy that pick up, they talked about all summer, Eddie Lacy. I mean, Eddie Lacy has carried the ball 7 times this season.
Yeah, I mean, what is missing are a lot of the hot dogs in the refreshment stands in the stadium there in Seattle, because Eddie Lacy snagged them. They're just not going to let him play, I think, until they think he's in shape to play. And that is an interesting thing. Their offensive line is a mess, but it's not as big a mess as people think. When you look at the film, they've done a relatively good job, and Russell Wilson doesn't seem to be as sharp as he was. Now, whether that's his receivers aren't getting open for him, or without the run game, it's become a little bit more difficult, I'm not sure. But the blaming everything on the offensive line is not necessarily the answer for Seattle, but that is the answer for Indianapolis. You've got to keep pressure on Russell Wilson. You've got to keep him in the pocket, and you have to keep the receivers more or less covered. How you do both is difficult if your defense isn't really good, because if you put extra guys back to confuse Wilson when he breaks the pocket and hope someone comes, you have fewer guys rushing. And they're a team without a premium pass rusher as well.
So is this you look at this, sometimes look at a team, you go, whew, this is exactly what we needed. The Indianapolis Colts are 31st in points allowed, giving up 30 a game. Is this exactly what Seattle's offense needed?
Yeah, this game is what it looks like it's going to be. A not very good Colts team with in effect a rookie quarterback in his third start, coming into a really difficult stadium to play in against a defense that still has 5 or 6 top-class players in that defense and schemes very well, and a quarterback who can make big plays. I don't see it going any other way but a home win.
Yeah, important game for Seattle in that NFC West, which no one has really grabbed a hold of as of yet. Our final one, Washington Redskins and the Kansas City Chiefs, the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. Only 2 teams left, one in the AFC, one in the NFC, with the undefeated mark. But the Washington Redskins getting better each and every week. As a matter of fact, Kirk Cousins was the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. But you look, let's jump on this with this Kansas City team. 3-0. Andy Reid has these guys playing. But you look at Kansas City versus so many other teams, very strong in offense, very strong in defense, but also they haven't forgot about making sure that they are strong in special teams.
Yeah, and and how many teams are really solid on both sides of the ball, first off, and then add the special teams. With Tyreek Hill, you've got a return guy who's always a threat to take it all the way. They've got a good punter, which means they win the game of field possession most of the time. And their kicker, Santos, is no one really pays much attention to him, but he's been very effective for them. So you're absolutely right. They've got all facets of the game covered, and there's only a handful of teams in the NFL that can say that.
They talk about that, efficiency, that this Washington Redskins defense is supposed to be the 3rd most efficient defense in the National Football League. But then they're up against Kareem Hunt and that Kansas City offense, 162 yards a game, which is #1 running the football. This
is going to be a really fascinating matchup, because you saw how well Greg Minuski, the defensive coordinator in Washington, game planned against Oakland with the 3-4 defense he's put in, and they did a great job. You mentioned Jonathan Allen when we were talking about rookies. They drafted well. They signed a couple of low-profile free agents, but guys who were good fits up front for a 3-4 defense. So they're very, very solid in that defense, and he game planned against Oakland really well. Kansas City is going to be a lot harder to game plan for, but it's going to be a great matchup, because Andy Reid will be looking at that tape of what they did and trying to figure out ways of working around that. A lot of play action, probably a lot of guys crossing through the middle, a lot of backs out of the backfield. And Minuski's going to have to come up with a solution for that. Kansas City will be able to defend, will be able to pass block pretty well. Mm-hmm. And Alex Smith has been very good this season at getting out of the pocket without getting into trouble. But if you can keep him in the pocket, when he steps forward, that's when he makes bad passes. When he's trying to avoid the rush, he gets his balance all wrong. He becomes inaccurate. If you let him out to the side, he's fine. A couple of steps sideways, and he's accurate again.
Why is everyone always on Alex Smith? I mean, Alex Smith could be playing super football, but it's, Kansas City is great, but it's all about what is Alex Smith going to do to ruin it. Two reasons. One applies to Andy Reid as well. Mm-hmm. They win a lot of games. They're consistently good. They've never won the big one. Okay, so that's like point number one. Point number two, specifically with Alex Smith, is he's not really a deep ball thrower. Okay. Now, he's better than, say, Andy Dalton, who's similar in kind of reputation and style. But the book is, what you do is you try to stop the short pass. You try to make Alex Smith take the extra time to wind up and throw deep, and you will beat Kansas City. And I suspect that's what Washington's going to try to do. Last year, the Washington Redskins, they picked up Josh Norman. This year, they picked up DJ Swearinger. So it seems like their defense, their back line, getting tougher, stronger, more physical back there. Yeah,
and they want to be able to man cover on the outside. Now, the thing with Kansas City is that the wide receivers aren't the biggest threat to you. I mean, where their big threats come are out of the backfield, depending on where Tyreek Hill lines up. But but usually he'll be in the slot, or he might be coming out of the backfield. Hunt is the same thing, and Kelsey at tight end is going to be running the shorter patterns, trying to beat you on the seam. But that means your corners are man on out guys like Albert Wilson, say, who you pretty much don't think are going to beat you. And some teams, you've seen it done playing the Patriots. Denver did that a couple of years ago. You put a cornerback on Gronkowski, say. I would not be adverse to putting Josh Norman on Jason Kelsey. Let him man cover the tight end and see how that works. And then, maybe play a nickel, or maybe move a safety to cover on a wide receiver, or play zone back there. And that's the kind of twists I expect they might be willing to try. On the other hand, I might be a little surprised, but you're kind of wasting your good corners if they're not covering the other team's biggest threats.
The Kansas City Chiefs, third in total yards. Kansas City Chiefs, third in points scored, dropping 31 a game. But these Washington Redskins last week held the Oakland Raiders to 128 yards, a team that's in that West. Who do you see surviving this one? The offense of Kansas City, defense of the Washington Redskins?
I think the offense can survive. Again, like I say, it's a chess game. It's going to be a very interesting chess game. But because they have those secondary weapons, do you have someone who can cover Tyreek Hill man-to-man, or are you going to sit in zone? Because he can outrun you if you're in man. If you sit in zone, Kelsey can tear you apart. If Reid game plans well, Kansas City's going to get the points. Even if they stop them defensively, what you talked about, special teams, short fields, things like that, turnovers, can really help. They miss Eric Reid on the back end, but at home, again, I mean, there are some games where you just think the home advantage is enough on its own to carry these two pretty evenly matched teams. So Kansas City.
Wonder if the Kansas City Chiefs will remain the only undefeated team in the AFC. I'm Kevin Cato. He's Mike Carlson, the guru. We also want to thank Red Zone Sports from the team at SportsHeads. We thank you as well. And remember, if you want to get ahead in sports, check in to SportsHeads.
redzonesports.bet, the British home of American sports.
Watching SportsHeads. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, but you can also hit us on Twitter, Instagram. We would love to hear from you. We're trying to take the program from next level to next level to next level. Enjoy.